Aha. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and colleagues, Your Excellencies, it is my pleasure to welcome you all today. My name is Ghassan El-Kahlout, and I'm the director of the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies, which is an independent academic research center based here in Doha. It is my pleasure to warmly welcome you all here today for this important lecture that will be delivered by Kate Forbes, President of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Today's event is jointly hosted by the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies with the Qatar Red Crescent Society, and I would like to especially welcome Mr. Faisal Al-Amadi, Secretary General of the Qatar Red Crescent Society. We gather here today to discuss one of the most pressing humanitarian challenges of our time, the protection of children in disaster, emergency, and crisis situations. It reflects our commitment to protecting children from harm and ensuring their right to live without fear or violence. The collective responsibility is to safeguard the future of children is reflected in the powerful words of Nelson Mandela. We owe our children, the most vulnerable citizen in any society, a life free from violence and fear. Children are often the most vulnerable during crises, whether those crises are caused by natural disasters, armed conflict, or other emergencies. We see this especially in our region, where the ongoing war in Gaza serves as a painful reminder of the impact of conflict in children. Over 16,500 children have tragically been killed during the genocide in Gaza. These are not just numbers, but lives cut short, dreams left unfulfilled, and future stolen. Each one of these children represents a profound loss to their families, communities, and to all of us. For the hundreds of thousands of Palestinian children living through the genocide, for the second year running, the start of a school calendar has been massively disrupted, with education provided in makeshift classroom or not at all. This tragic situation is bound to create a lost generation if left unaddressed. This is a stark reminder of the importance of education during conflict, with today marking the International Day to Protect Education from Attack. Around the world, education continues to be under threat in conflict zones. About 6,000 attacks on education took place in 2022 and 2023. With over 10,000 students, teachers, and academics harmed, injured, or killed in this armed conflict across the globe. These attacks not only destroy physical infrastructure, but also rob children of their right to learn, grow, and build a better future. Whether in Sudan, Syria, Afghanistan, Gaza, Yemen, children's access to education has been continually under assault, and this must be addressed with urgency. Protecting children, especially in such hostile environment, is not just a humanitarian duty, but a global legal obligation. There must be a strengthening of international cooperation to safeguard children's rights and well-being. Organizations like the International Red Cross and Red Crescent has been working to provide protection and aid to children in conflict zones, offering hope and relief to those who need it most. And in this occasion, we honor the memory of the brave souls who gave their lives in the noble pursuit of saving others. We remember here the two Red Crescent staff who were killed while trying to save the 6-year-old Hind Rajab. Their selfless dedication to humanity, even in the face of unimaginable danger, will forever stand as a testament to the courage and compassion. In Qatar, the country is proud to be a leader in these efforts. Qatar's commitment to protecting children is evident in its leading role in advocating for the adoption of a safe school declaration. that stress the importance of safeguarding schools from military use during conflict and ensuring that education remains uninterrupted, even in the most challenging situation. Qatar has been at the forefront of effort to provide education support to children affected by conflict, particularly in Afghanistan among Syrian refugees. As we focus on the protection of children today, we are privileged to have with us a distinguished guest who has dedicated her career to this very mission. Mrs. Kate Forbes, President of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society, a humanitarian leader with over 40 years of experience. Since joining the American Red Cross in 1981, Kate has served in numerous leadership roles in the organization. Throughout her career, improving safety and well-being through community engagement and mobilizing volunteers globally. Kate also brings substantial experience in executive leadership in the corporate sector, serving as a chief financial officer for various groups, including Electric Application Incorporated. Her distinguished leadership in the humanitarian and corporate field has been recognized through numerous awards. I'm honored today to welcome you, Kate, to share your insight with us today. Following, inshallah, the lecture, we will be opening the floor for questions, and we encourage everyone to engage in this critical conversation. The lecture is being translated into Arabic, and it is streamed live on the Center social media platform, including Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And we kindly ask our audience online to leave their question and inquiries in the comment section, and our colleagues from the center will communicate the question to us. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Kate. Floor is yours, Kate.
Thank you so much for that very kind and generous introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished students and professors, I thank you for this invitation. I'm very honored to address you today on a subject that strikes to the very heart of the humanitarian mission of my organization, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Earlier this year, I met a 3-year-old little girl in Gaza, displaced, exhausted. She handed me a drawing of a rocket destroying her house. That picture, her innocence lost, broke my heart. When I think about protecting children in disasters and conflicts in Gaza, I think about her hopes and dreams. I think about how can we protect her and the millions of children like her living in vulnerable, dangerous, and devastating conditions. I became president of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Cross Societies, the IFRC, in December of last year. As mentioned, after serving as a volunteer in the Red Cross Red Crescent family for 43 years, starting in my home branch, helping neighbors that I knew and people across the U.S. that I did not. I recently just discussed Katrina, which was a very famous hurricane that hit New Orleans and killed and stranded many, and I responded to that. And there too, I saw children displaced from their homes, and many never had the opportunity to go back. The IFRC is the world's largest volunteer-based humanitarian network, reaching about 160 million people each year through our 191 member national societies and our 16 million volunteers. The Red Cross and Red Crescent is present in nearly every community worldwide, including here in Doha, where the Qatar Red Crescent helps those in need. And today, I saw the amazing work they do with workers in their hospitals responding to disasters here and around the world. I believe 55 countries, if I remember the number right. So I am truly honored and humbled to serve as the president of the world's largest humanitarian network. In this role, in this role, it is a large responsibility and privilege to travel to some of the world's most challenging places, such as the Middle East, including Gaza, the West Bank, Palestine, and Israel, the Horn of Africa, Bangladesh, and Colombia. During these visits, I have seen children dramatically impacted by circumstances beyond their control. These trips have reinforced the undeniable truth that humanitarian principles are not just ideals. They are the lifelines for millions of people and millions of children in desperate need. As was mentioned before, children are disproportionately affected by crisis. According to UNICEF, over 400 million children live in countries where there is war or violent conflict. Let me say it again. 400 million children live where there is either war or violent conflict. And when this violence occurs, it's often children who are forced to flee their homes, and tragically, many remain displaced for extended period of time, and some never return home. Some are orphaned or separated from their parents or those who care for them. Children face steep challenges when natural hazards strike, or families are forced to flee their homes and migrate to try and find safety. They're exposed to diseases and violence and often live in extreme poverty. In those contexts, children face unique threats: separation from families, recruitment by armed forces, trafficking, physical and sexual violence, and the denial of basic needs like education, health care, and protection. In my role at the IFRC, I've seen these statistics in raw and painful reality. Recently, I was in Bangladesh, where I visited Cox's Bazar, the world's largest refugee camp, consisting of nearly 1 million people who fled violence in neighboring Myanmar. While I was there, I saw children who had never lived outside the camp, and for them, it was the only world they knew. I met a mother who told me of her 12-year-old son who had been sold and trafficked. She'd not heard from him over a year and pleaded with me for any news about his whereabouts or safety, or would I be able to return him to her. In Panama, I met mothers who hiked one of the most perilous migrant routes in the world, the Darien Gap. With small children on their back, they emerged from this 70-mile, deadly and treacherous jungle, hungry, children dehydrated and covered with insect bites, desperate for medical service and food and a place to stay. In Africa, in the Horn of Africa, I met with women who walked for days to take malnutrition children to feeding centers. With each step, there was more pain, more agony, but they pushed forward to give their children some hope of some relief from the suffering they were enduring. The protection of children in crisis is grounded in humanitarian law, human rights law, and refugee law. Central to these is the Convention on the Rights of Children, which refers to protection and development. regardless of the context of where they live. So how do we give all children the best possible opportunity? Unfortunately, there is no simple answer, and the challenges, quite frankly, are immense. In conflict and fragile settings, ensuring neutrality can be incredibly difficult when access is controlled by multiple factions with different agendas. Moreover, the polarization of aid, shrinking humanitarian space, and attacks on our humanitarian workers add layers of difficulty in reaching those most in need, including children. This year alone, the IFRC has lost 30 volunteers and staff trying to deliver aid in Gaza and Sudan. In refugee camps, humanitarian organizations face limited resources, restrictions on their operations, and pressures to align with broader political objectives. Upholding neutrality and impartiality in these contexts require constant vigilance and unwavering commitment to our core principles. In disaster areas, the frequency and severity of climate-related events due to climate change are bringing new challenges, such as logistical issues and our ability to respond to them in a timely and effective and long-term method. In all these contexts, children, especially those who are unaccompanied, displaced, or in marginalized communities, often fall through the cracks. The IFRC has a long-standing commitment to child protection. Our teams are uniquely positioned to assist during the most challenging and difficult of times. Our child safeguarding policy provides a comprehensive framework for ensuring our programs and actions in all contexts are designed and implemented with the best interest of children in mind. This policy aims to protect children from all forms of violence, abuse, exploitation, and neglect against all IFRC programs, prioritizing preventative actions and ensuring accountability. The policy also lays out a clear course of action for our National Red Cross and Red Crescent societies, requiring mandatory child protection measures, including risk assessment, safe recruitment practices, and community engagement strategies. But we all know that policies are not enough. We need to ensure that our commitment to child protection is reflected in our actions on the ground. This involves ensuring that our humanitarian responses are child-centered, inclusive, and aligned with international standards, such as the minimum standards for child protection and humanitarian action, which covers protection issues such as dangers, injuries, physical and emotional maltreatment, and the needs of unaccompanied and especially separated children. An essential component of our approach is providing psychosocial support to children who've experienced trauma. Evidence from numerous studies highlight the long physical, psychological impact of violence and instability on children. That is why we have integrated psychological support into all aspects of our response, providing safe space for children to express themselves and heal. Based on our long experience in challenging contexts, we know that the key to providing safety and opportunity for children goes well beyond our organization. We know that it requires working across sectors with diverse stakeholders, from governments and civil society organizations to local communities, and with the children themselves. One of our strengths is our National Red Cross and Red Crescent societies are auxiliaries to their governments, and our presence within communities before, during, and after crises. This position allows us to build trust and tailor our interventions to the specific needs of each context. In disasters, we collaborate with local authorities to ensure that children are accounted for in evacuation plans and that their unique needs are considered in disaster risk reduction strategies. We also work with governments to embed child protection within the domestic laws and disaster preparedness plans. In conflict situations, we work to ensure that our neutrality and impartiality allows us to access all children in need, regardless of their location or status. We also prioritize children's access to education. The disruption of education in emergencies can and does have lifelong consequences for children. Ensuring access to a safe learning environment, both in a conflict or disaster context, is fundamental to their development and protection. As we look to the future, we must create a world where children can have food, live and grow in a healthy and safe environment, learn and fulfill their dreams. Here are the 3 key areas that we at the IFRC are prioritizing. Legal. Our study on the legal frameworks that are needed to protect children in disasters revealed that many governments lack adequate laws, policies, or regulations to protect children in disasters. We are working with these governments to address this critical gap. Climate. Climate change is a huge part of our future, and we are focusing on the increasing vulnerabilities of children due to climate-related disasters. In regions like Southeast Asia and the Caribbean, we are developing practical actions to improve child protection during climate-related disasters based on extensive surveys and stakeholder interviews. And lastly, anticipatory action. We are integrating child protection into anticipatory action frameworks, moving from a relatively proactive approach and safeguarding children. With this approach, we aim to protect the children before disasters strikes. So, in closing, I call upon all of you and all stakeholders to join us in this vital mission. We must act with urgency and determination for the protection of our children, because it is not just a responsibility, it is a moral obligation. And we must act now. We all have the resources to create a future where every child, regardless of their circumstances, can grow up in safety, with dignity, and with the opportunity to thrive. In my office in Geneva, I have kept that picture of the rocket the little girl in Gaza gave me. When I do this work, I think about the future I want her to have. A safe home, a place to play, a school where she can learn, laugh, and love, and never go to sleep hungry. Together, we can make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Now, I will start with 2 questions, building on the excellent talk by Kate now. And, what has taken my attention, speaking about, 2 things that the IFRC is distinguished in. The first one, it is about the humanitarian diplomacy. And so I want to see from your experience, that the IFRC with the societies are working in conflict zone. Bangladesh, we're speaking about, the refugee camp there. In Sudan, it's conflict, Yemen, and different places in the world. So if you can explain to us and how the IFRC is employing a humanitarian diplomacy to engage with government, non-state arms groups, conflicting parties, to influence decision-making to protect the children in conflict zones.
Well, thank you for that question. And as I think, as you said, influence, if Mariana was here from the ICRC and myself, we often say our job is humanitarian aid and the government's jobs are to help us have the ability to give that. But we need both of us to urge them. And we're doing several things on that front. First, in my first 9 months, I visited 20 countries, and every country I was in, I meet with the governments there to reinforce what needs to be done. I'm also fortunate enough to meet with a number of ambassadors from various countries assigned there and ask them as well. I also believe that I've been to the UN, but what we really need to do is have a much broader support. People need to understand why this is important to every single citizen worldwide. I was recently where I heard a quote from a historian that said, you know, if we don't understand our past, we don't understand our future. But the globe's not safe, or none of us are safe. And I think that's with humanitarian law. If we want basis, we each need to be safe. So this year we will be having our international conference, and one of the big topics there, with 190 plus national societies, will be enforcing humanitarian law. And it's a unique opportunity that doesn't happen anywhere else, where governments are paired with humanitarian organizations as the ICRC and the IFRC to talk about what does this mean. And we need to continue. I think we need to turn up our volume. I think at times we've thought being neutral meant being quiet. And being neutral does not mean being quiet. Being neutral means explain why this is important, why each of us need to do it. We were talking earlier, I was talking with the Qatar Red Crescent. We need to bring humanitarian law back into schools. And I'm delighted in this country, they start in the 3rd grade to talk about it. You don't teach people how to behave as humanitarian when they're 40. You teach them when they're children and they're getting their ideas about what the world's all about. So working with governments individually, working on the UN, working on large scales, but working also in any context we can to bring light to why humanitarian law matters, and diplomacy, I still believe, is a path forward.
Yeah, and continuing in our discussion today earlier, and the question that has been raised by my student, I'm teaching a course on ethical and legal aspect of a humanitarian action. And when we started the course, I have taught the course last year also, and it is very difficult to teach this course right now. And since we're speaking about Red Cross movement, Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, the movement that has founded, those humanitarian principles. We're speaking about humanity, impartiality, neutrality, independence, and we're speaking about IHL, speaking about the human rights law, and we're speaking about refugees law. We teach this to our students, but always I'm struck by, the feedback from our students. Do you believe that it is still valid and relevant, speaking about, 40,000 civilians being killed, and those humanitarian norms and the humanitarian law and the humanitarian principles are not helping, to protect those in need? You're speaking about the whole thing has been created to save humanity, to help people live in dignity and to save lives. But unfortunately, the humanitarian system worldwide is not able to deliver aid in some of the most complex and difficult crises. So I want to have your opinion about the relevance of humanitarian principles, IHL, and the relevant laws.
Well, I believe they're more relevant than ever.
Uh-huh.
I think if they've ever been more relevant today, I don't know when it has. This is when we should be absolutely talking about it. And just because it's difficult doesn't mean we don't continue to try. Every morning I wake up, and I believe the vast majority of those I work with wake every morning with the idea we will get humanitarian aid in today. We are going to model the behavior we think that's appropriate. And to give up is absolutely the worst thing we can do. What we have to do, sometimes celebrate the small successes, keep pressure on for we need to have larger pressure and larger responses. And I believe we will persevere and this space will open up again. If we walk away, it never will be. There'll be more atrocities. And it's terrible what's going on in the world. But I've spent the last 2 weeks in the Middle East. This is my 4th visit. And what is more determination to deliver humanitarian aid, more determination to live by our principles. We may not be successful every day, but I don't doubt that we will be. And I don't believe that giving up on it is even an option. And we have had successes, and it's not easy. You can't just have your fundamental principles when it's easy and everyone's nodding in the same way. You have to have them and believe them to your core, which I do, believe that they make a difference, and live them and model them. And I believe at the end of the day, people will say, I'd rather follow that path than the other. And we just have to keep pushing onward.
Excellent. Thank you, Kate. And now we would like to open the floor to questions from the audience. Would like to open the floor to questions from the audience.
Okay, is this working? Thank you very much for your time.
Introduce your name.
Yes, my name is Nadine Sleiman. I'm a student, just a student, nothing more, nothing less.
No, not just a student. You're a student.
I should say it with more confidence, right? No, but I'm very grateful for this opportunity and the time that all of you have taken to speak here today. Something that I really wanted to mention is your speech really touched me, and it really spoke to me on a very deep level. I'm of Lebanese descent, and my family is from southern Lebanon. So what is going on right now is affecting me on a very deep level. And you mentioned how heartbroken you are, and I just wanted to say that I feel like it is important to be heartbroken, but what is more important right now is to have courage. So I feel like even if you say that you're heartbroken, I feel the same, I do, but I feel even more courage. So what I wanted to ask was similar to the question that Dr. Ghassan has said, which is what do you plan on changing in your advocacy and in your approach to talking to policymakers and decision makers in order to have a more effective approach in talking about children in general, but also specifically right now about Palestinian children, because we're not just talking about their rights to education and their rights to thrive, but we're talking about literally their very basic right to exist as Palestinian children. So my question is, how do you plan on addressing the very need to have more effective approaches to advocacy strategies? Thank you so much.
Question? We'll take other questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I have a quick question. Sorry. Okay. Okay. My name is Hussam Eddin Al-Laham. Previously master student at Conflict Center, and now serving for Qatar Red Crescent. My question actually related to the conflict sensitivities. Each conflict has its own sensitivities, and also the conflicted parties also have their own sensitivities. So my question, how does the IFRC ensure that the humanitarian interventions through the programs tailored with the power dynamics in each conflict and also related to the conflict sensitivities? So any type of, let's say, strategies revised by IFRC in order to maintain that those interventions tailored with the conflict sensitivities and the power dynamics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this a very effective presentation that I have heard from you. I think sometimes when conflicts takes place, we know that the solutions are in the hands of the politicians, not in the hands of the humanitarians anyway, whatever power they have. But the problem is when there is like a state of psychological numbness of the day by day taking place, especially the loss of lives of children, specifically who are core civilians, basically. I mean, the question is, I mean, of course, morality and the moral compass is very, very important and essential for politicians to decide basically in the right way and to end and cease fire, basically, and allow humanitarian access. Right now, we see that there is the return of polio for children, you know, specifically in Gaza, which is really very disturbing. And I'm not sure whether the whole humanitarian system would be able really to respond to a state of Gaza at this level. And it seems as if like there is definitely a state of numbness that's taking place, which is quite dangerous. And sometimes it brings some frustrations for people like myself who teach as well humanitarian ethics and so on, especially what Dr. Ghassan mentioned. So what can you say to us basically so that we don't feel in the trap of being in a state of numbness while we see day by day this crisis? Thank you.
So advocacy, conflict, sensitivity, and a state of numbness, so kind of the three things. I guess I'll go in reverse order if that's all right. I feel many things, but numbness is not one. I feel shock and, quite frankly, at times anger at what's going on. I am human. And it's not just about the children in Gaza. It's the babies I saw coming out of the Darien Gap from the unrest in Venezuela. Or the children in Cox's Bazar, the 33,000 babies that were born last year and have no hope of probably going anywhere in the near future with no education. And the woman I mentioned in my speech, the reason that she sold her children essentially was that the allocation for food went from $12 a month per person to $8, and she couldn't feed all her children. So our children are being under siege globally. And I think you made the observation, and again, we need the help from the governments. It is not the humanitarians that can solve this problem. We are prepared to respond in every way possible. This week I was at an IFRC MENA conference where the topic of conversation was getting ready to respond to Gaza when this horrible conflict ends. And how are we doing? What we're doing is to be prepared and not to give up hope. We cannot allow ourselves not to become into a state of numbness. In fact, we have to constantly reevaluate our plans for all kind of aid to get in. I think how we do that is we have to basically believe that the humanitarian sector will and wants to respond to where these kind of crises happen, whether it be due to in Gaza or through Venezuela, through the Gap, or Myanmar in Asia Pacific. Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of we only have this in one part of the world, but we have to be prepared to do that. And as I said, we have both today, it was interesting to me that prior to COVID, and if I get the numbers wrong, help me, you had about 2,500 volunteers, we had a crisis, and we now have 30,000 volunteers here. We see that within our movement, that when these kind of unbelievably horrible things happen, we don't retreat. In fact, our volunteer cadre expands. is just as a side, you know, mpox is now impacting children, much like, and we've had a huge response of people wanting to come to us to help protect children for that. One of the things we're managing now is how the relief, and my job is to help coordinate everyone so that we are ready to respond. The desire to respond is going up, not retreating. So at least within my organization, we believe in action. And it isn't just my heart is broken. When I come back and I look at that picture, I think, what actions do we need to be doing today? Who can I speak to? What interview can I give? You know, I've done an op-ed in the New York Times that reached, we think, 28 million people to talk about the need to protect humanitarian aid workers. Where do I go to the UN? What prime minister can I talk to? So put pressure on the governments to solve it, and simultaneously ensure that our coordination, which was the conversation we had today, is ready and prepared that when the governments get a ceasefire, that we can respond immediately. So that's really key to me. So advocacy is a huge part of my job, probably one of the most important things that I do, you know, in a way, and as well. And then the conflict sensitivity over there. I'm not quite sure I know exactly what you mean by that, but we do look at each area and determine how best to respond, whether it be what type of aid should we have? How do we assure a safe environment when aid workers come in so we can do it? What is the long and short-term solutions that need to have? Because you're right, there may be differences, but I'd also challenge you in your premise. There are also very much very similarities. It tends to be women and children who are mostly impacted, both by conflict, but also in disasters as well. So we know we need to react and provide for them in a bit different ways than maybe others. We know that it's important that we maintain our neutrality. And oftentimes with the governments, that's difficult for them to see that we are going to help whoever comes into our camps. So that happens as well. So again, I think as I look, we have in a shrinking humanitarian space maybe, but where these conflicts become visible, we see an influx of volunteers and aid. Quite frankly, my challenge are the ones that become invisible. A while ago, everyone was talking about Cox's Bazar. No one's talking about Cox's Bazar today. So how do we keep a spotlight on all? Because every child, as I said in my remarks, deserves a safe environment and the ability to grow. So I am basically optimistic. I basically believe in our fundamental principles, and the 16 million and growing volunteers and staff that we have around the world are ready to make a difference. And as Mariana and I say, we need governments to create an environment for peace. We need to stop the killing so that we can do our work, which is delivering humanitarian aid.
And last question about advocacy. You get the answer? Yeah, there's a question for Abdullah. Yeah, question that has just been shared by the colleagues. It's recognizing the leading humanitarian role of the Gulf states and their very Crescent societies. How is the IFRC encouraging a greater regional and global collaboration with these national societies to further enhance child protection efforts in conflict zones? How IFRC is working with the Qatari, Kuwaiti, United Arab Emirates, Saudi to further enhance child protection. And I believe that with the cultural proximity, we might be speaking about, enhancing child protection in the Arab countries.
So I'm very pleased with a region that had historically been a bit fractured, that we're now earlier, or it was last week, we had what we call a MENA conference, which is Middle East, North Africa, and where there was a joint declaration among national societies to speak on how we coordinate aid, who does what and when, how do national societies support each other. And one of the reasons for my visit to this part of the region was to continue to encourage that. And just today, we had a conversation that it's very important that we coordinate what type of aid comes in. So as the example was given, we don't want everyone to show up with bottled water and no food or no clothing. And how do we do that? And unfortunately, I believe this is going to be a decade's response and also a short term. So I say it's going to be a sprint and a marathon. So we're organizing for the sprint on how do we have short-term aid, and then long-term, who will be responsible for what, and ongoing dialogue and cooperation for within, because really the Gulf Coast community, natural societies are uniquely positioned, not only from a resource-wise, but from a cultural wise, to respond in a very strong way. And we see that cooperation forward. We all see what's coming ahead of us. We're just eager to start in getting the humanitarian aid started again. And we did for a while. We made some progress. As you all know, we've maybe taken a step or two backwards. Not that we're not ready, but having access. But what we need to do is be talking to each other, have a plan, and we do that scenario planning all the time. So I don't think there's a day that doesn't go by, at least on my desk, I don't get some conversation about coordination. And also not only within our national societies, but you did not mention also the ICRC. We are a wide movement that have to coordinate all portions of our movement. So being prepared, talking, relationships, memorandums of understanding between, and stockpiling very much needed inventory is happening as we speak.
Thank you, Pete. Abdullah?
Thank you very much for your presentation and for the opportunity to address you and speak to you and listen to you. My name is Abdullah from Palestine, and I'm also a student. You spoke, there was a few questions about policy and like engaging with governments, and you spoke about our responsibility as human beings towards each other and with humanitarian intervention. I actually want to ask you about if you have done any work with like the US government and what type of programs, because you mentioned the education in Qatar. Are there any educational programs about the responsibility also of those countries, not only in giving aid and money to places of crisis and to organizations like your organization, but also about prevention of humanitarian crisis? Because there are responsibilities on those powerful countries who also do like export not only money but also export weapons. So what type of engagements do you have with these same governments in terms of policy and educational programs for their schools and universities? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mohammed Elian. I'm working as integration coordinator in Sweden. First of all, if we talk about a relative word, it doesn't start in a specific time and it doesn't end in a specific time. It can happen that it starts in a specific time, but it can follow the victim forever. I have received many of children and cases in Sweden who is still stuck in trauma, still stuck in a situation that happened in their life. And most of them survived, thankfully. There is also many who didn't survive, even in the safest zones in the world. If we talk about Scandinavian world, I don't have a specific number in my head right now, but I have been in contact with many colleagues all over the world who is talking about survivors did suicide, didn't survive literally, as the word means in all contexts. The question is, when will we see that concentration, that focus on psychiatric support as we see on the physical support? When will we see IFRC, since psychologists, since psychiatric experts, together with surgeons and medicine and clothing and blah, 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 when we will see that concentration on psychiatric support to save as much as we can, or at least to stop the consequences which related to the crisis? Thank you.
Yeah. So we can have the three questions now. Yeah. Yeah. Humanitarian workers, including those with the IFRC, often risk their lives to protect and assist vulnerable population, especially children. What steps is the IFRC is taken to ensure the safety and security of staff on the ground, particularly in high-risk crisis zones? And how can they improve the protection of those who protect others? And is there any legal measures can be taken by IFRC to sue government that they are killing IFRC staff on the ground? Any legal action can be taken by IFRC against government who are killing, IFRC staff on the ground? Legal. For example, we see destruction, we expect compensation, and we see killing. Those who are killing, they should be, taken to court. And this is what I understand from the question. So, for example, we're speaking about some of IFRC staff in the movement that they have been killed intentionally. Are there any action that can be taken by the organization to protect their staff and to forbid those countries from taking this criminal action in the future?
So, education of government, psychosocial support, and security of staff, right? On the education of governments, I think I mentioned in my remarks that, and I know I sound a bit like a broken record, but clearly, and that kind of links to your last question, is we talk about observing the fundamental principles and our outrage, and unfortunately, I'll kind of combine the two, when it's not terribly safe, sometimes we have to not let our staff go in. I mean, that's the ultimate. I mean, we have some kind of moral obligation to our staff that we can't send them where it's unreasonable to go. And actually, it's harder many times to convince them not to go than to go. And some of the things we're doing to try again, I mentioned we're having an international conference this year with governments to reinforce the need for them to respect the Geneva Conventions, their signatures to the Geneva Conventions, understand what that means, and we have a whole campaign, We Are Not a Target, that we've used. But again, I mentioned, unfortunately, since I became president, 30 of our volunteers and staff have died in the line of service. Writing those letters is the hardest thing I do. And I take it very, very personally when that happens. And we try our best. And you mentioned about the one instance with the ambulance driver. And when I was in Gaza, the last thing I did was thank the ambulance drivers for their courage, for their service, And by the time I got back to the hotel, one of them had been killed. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. This just can't happen. But if any of you have a magic solution, I'm happy to carry it out. But all I know to do is to up the volume, have more voices say that it's unacceptable, and have early, as I mentioned, education, why it's critical. The Geneva Conventions, which were 75 years old this past month, came into play. What happened that we needed to have them and why governments made a pledge to do it. So it's absolutely important for that. And someone had asked me that I spoke to the U.S. government about getting aid and their role. I don't stop, even though I'm American. Yes, I've spoken to the U.S. government. I've spoken to the EU. I've been to Brits. We have 30 prominent national societies on our board of governors where we talk about them. They, too, put on pressure. So it is a constant conversation. And for the most part, and I'll just say that there is frustration across the humanitarian sector that we're not being able to do what we want to do. And as I want to emphasize on all of you again, my job is to get humanitarian aid in. And we need to, all of us, it's not just me at the IFRC, all of you are citizens of some government as well, to put pressure on to say we need to have space to deliver humanitarian aid. I think it's a joint responsibility, quite frankly, from that standpoint. So I wish I could protect everyone. I try to. We work very hard to have security briefings, to train people, to know what to do, to keep our people safe, to be, people understand what the what our emblems mean, and that's an ongoing issue. But as we all say, we need to continue to keep that pressure on.
Can I talk to you?
Sure, absolutely. You maybe have the answer, and I'll take notes. It'll be good.
Yeah, I'm speaking about the legal action here. If I know that a government with soldiers, with their names, is known, and it is on TV, and they are doing it on TV, and everyone knows who has done this crime, they have killed my staff, what's stopping me from taking legal action? IHL is speaking about humanitarian action. Humanitarian is those who are not complying to IHL, they are doing crimes against humanity. I'm not a legal expert. Why the organization? I'm responsible to protect my staff. Last time, one of my colleagues has some problems here in the country, and I had to stand with her and support and give all the support. If one of my staff is being killed, I have to protect my staff for now and for the future. And we should teach carrying those war crimes for decades, that they shouldn't be doing this again. So why no legal action is being taken, to protect my staff? This is the issue. If my staff is being killed, I have to protect them. It's very simple. If I, institutional practice that I should stand for my staff and I should protect them. If someone is attacking them, I will do my best, to protect them. And if one of my staff is being killed, I have to try my best to take their right, to advocate for their right, especially that it is considered against international humanitarian law. So this is my comment on this.
I understand your point. I understand your anger. I understand your frustration. And again, if you look at our movement through both sides, we do, when there are actions we have gone in the past to authorities and registered our concern about what has transpired, that has happened. But I think it is the collective governments where we're the auxiliary. Where's their anger when we are part of their staff, if you will. They have a right to take action, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's multi-responsibility for all of us to say that we need to take action. And I think working jointly with our governments, the national societies where this has happened, they are going to have a stronger voice than we will, even in the humanitarian sector. So working jointly with our governments to pursue that is important. I know, so that's how I would answer it. We need to go to our governments, we're auxiliary, and they should be even more outraged than we are.
Thank you. Now we have the two other questions about, we teach in humanitarian principles, humanitarian action, IHL to our student. This is a question, Abdullah. So we speak in our, from your experience with the American Red Cross, are we teaching a humanitarian intervention and, conflict prevention to students in the United States schools? This is a question, Abdullah?
Oh, okay. You're looking at an IHL instructor for the American Red Cross. So yes, I haven't been teaching since last December, because I've been doing a few other things. But yes, we have a very robust program on IHL. I had to take a class even at the time. I was the vice chair of the governing board. I had to be certified, and yes, we have a program, and yes, we do teach it. I'm sorry, in my remarks, I thought I had, and I obviously didn't do as good a job as I should have. You're absolutely right that the psychosocial support has to be present in everything we do, from giving aid, sheltering, post-recovery. And as we've looked through all of our activities that we're doing, one of the things we do a risk register, and psychosocial support is in it. And it's absolutely critical. And if you allow me, I'll tell one quick story. Again, it has to do with the Darien Gap in my part of the world. And I was in Panama. I was in Mexico City, rather. And there were children coming up from Venezuela into the U.S. And there were small children. They were the ages between 3 and 5, traumatized to such effect, some of them weren't speaking. And the volunteer in the Mexican Red Cross who saw these children was beyond troubled, went through one of the local universities and developed a program where they set the children down and they took a sock and they made a puppet out of it. So the child who had lost everything could have a friend that would travel with them, and children who had not spoken all of a sudden would talk to this puppet. It was a psychosocial support devised by youth for small children that has subsequently been certified and is going to be used in others. So not only do we think about it in the relief part, but post in trauma, and we're trying to change these programs depending to what level and what has happened. So we realize that that type of support is absolutely and maybe in sometimes even more important than giving people food and water to be able to understand. I see your hand up, so yes.
Thanks a lot for considering my question. Actually, I work as integration coordinator, and I am the one responsible to receive these kind of cases. And each time I receive a different case, I use myself as a live example. I am living and resident in Sweden, but basically I am from Palestine, specifically from Gaza Strip. I left Gaza in 2014 war. Until this moment, I still living the consequences for that war, even if we talk 10 years, 10 years was not, able to heal me if we talk about the psychiatric level. So it's really a big damage. You know, people collapsing. Doesn't matter where are they exactly. You know, in a safe zone or in a war zone. Yeah, you know, maybe more, definitely more than I know about the psychiatric consequences for this kind of situation. Thanks again.
I'm so sorry for your pain, and I hear what you're saying, that it's a long road to recovery. And again, we're part of humanitarian aid, and you know, I think we're recognizing it in the work we do. If you see a way that long-term we can do better, I'd love to offline discuss with you. But as you said, these are wounds we don't see, but these are wounds that people carry their whole life, many of them, and how we help is going to be really critical, not only at the IFRC, but throughout society.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ahad. I'm from Yemen, and I take course with Dr. Hassan as well. I just want to say something. I think the world will never recover the moral stain to what's happening to the children of Gaza. And it really breaks my heart every day to see these pictures. And I think it also breaks your heart. And also the IFRC staff that lost their life trying to provide humanitarian aid to these children. I just want to invite all the guests to stand up for a moment to honor the lives that have been lost, whether the lives of the children of Gaza and also the staff of IFRC. So if you can all stand up in the honor of these children for a moment, this is one of the ways to show our support for these children. Thank you.
Hi, Basma, mass communication graduate. So my question might be a little bit different. Aside from the psychosocial support that's given to people and especially children that have been experienced the trauma, in movies and fictional novels and also in real life situations, we see that the evil character usually experiences unfairness, injustice, such traumas that real children right now experience during disaster, emergency, and crisis situations. And you spoken about the psychosocial support that's given to students, to children that have been affected personally by the trauma. But do you think that there could be, and using the term protection here with the actual meaning of protection, which is to stop the thing from happening? Do you think that there could be a protection way or protection method or approach to stop children from becoming that evil character in their stories and other people's stories as well? Thank you so much.
I would hope so. I'm an accountant, so, you know, but I would hope so. Again, it's interesting, your questions today have kind of echoed the conversations we had with the president of the Qatar Red Crescent, where we talked about, and I think I mentioned it, we need to intervene, if you will, early. It's almost too late. I mean, we have to give cycles what happen, but prevention, as you said, is before. And sometimes I think we get lost in responding to the crisis and don't spend enough time thinking about what you just presented to me. So, with your permission, I'd like to think about that a bit more. I think it's more than IHL. It's more than those discussions. It's what do we teach our children in a way that would make them think this is not even a path they would follow. They would abhor this kind of situation we see. How do we, if you will, teach your children well? It's probably an American song that I think about. How do we teach our children well? And we need to spend as much time. I'm glad you brought this up. We need to spend as much time about teaching our children well as we do in responding to after they're so traumatized. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me?
We finish. Yeah. Do you want to take more questions? You have time?
Sure.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah, we have 3 questions here, 2 here and Wahiba there.
Okay, my name is Wahiba Saadi. I am a student of Doha Institute. And in the same time, I am also a volunteer in Red Crescent, Qatar Red Crescent. So my question here is, yes, we are teaching and educating other people about the 7 principles of Red Crescent and Red Cross, but we are not standing really to deliver the 7 principles. We have a gap, we have a challenges, and you know the challenges even more than me, better than me, but being in the field, in Al Arish or in Syria or any other countries who's suffering from disaster, we know that we have a gap of implementing and enforcing those 7 principles. So I think now Doctors Without Borders, they have a stand for their principle, and they deliver many times of press conference, and also the students in many universities also they stand for their principles against the criminalizations and against the colonialism, against the many other principles for them. But we didn't see the IFRC, they stand for their principle. We didn't see a press conference. We didn't see that, we didn't see that they are forcing or enforcing those 7 principles, except emotional empathy, which we don't want, because all of us are human, and all of us, we have emotion, and all of us, we are seeing the TV, and no one is, I don't think there is anyone in the world who have no empathy towards what's going on since 7th of October. And now we are already almost completing 1 year since the 7th of October, and nothing happened. Still people are suffering, still people are starving, still people, we didn't even able to deliver the food, which is the simple things we are talking about. So what's really the actions that's being made by IFRC since 7th of October? Emotional and empathy and...
Yeah, we have...
Sorry?
Speak about Sudan.
Yeah. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Well, I'm Sudanese, and I just came recently to Doha after the ongoing conflict in Sudan. And thank you, Kate, for the interesting session. Basically, my question concerning the human rights violation in Sudan and Palestine. And I know as international organization, you are doing a lot of support concerning the humanitarian support, and your work in Sudan with Sudanese Red Crescent, and also with other organizations. I mean, in the current situation in Sudan, in Palestine, there is a violation, and overall the world, they are aware about the situation in Palestine, what Israel they are doing. They are aware about the situation in Sudan, what the RSF they are doing. So I have seen some organizations like MSF, Medicine Sans Frontières, they are sharing some reports about the human rights violation by RSF. They are attacking hospitals, killing even humanitarian workers, rape, other issues. Indeed, staff also they are doing some kind of violation, human rights violation, but still we cannot compare the same situation. My question is, are you doing any kind of human rights advocacy with the other international organization concerning the human rights situation? I know you are a humanitarian organization, you are neutral, and I know about the human rights, the humanitarian principles. But my question, do you share any reports about the violation, for example, in Palestine by Israel, same situation like in Sudan? Because right now we are here and there is session at the UN Council talking about the findings of the human rights reports. So my questions about your advocacy concerning the human rights, because I think for us as a Sudanese, it's very important, for the Palestine as well. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Mrs. Forbes about the intention, whether you have the intention as IFRC to take over. We've been talking about the polio children of Gaza are suffering from, and then we have some countries who made their proposals to make available vaccines. Are you willing to check the vaccines first before delivering them to the children of Gaza? Thank you.
Let's see, you're breaking my heart when you said we haven't done any press conferences, because I have done a series of interviews. So obviously I'm not going to the right outlets, because I know I have spoken, plus we do a whole series of advocacy through public press, through social media, to try and educate and respond. And obviously we need to do a better job, because if you're not aware of what we're saying, our voice is out there. Oftentimes it gets drowned out, but that's no excuse. And I think I said earlier, I think we need to turn up the volume a bit. But I personally have spoken at the UN. I've issued articles to the New York Times. I've spoken to CNN, Al Jazeera. I do a series of explaining why we're so desperate to get humanitarian aid in. And for a while, we were getting it in. We were getting not as much as we wanted, but we were getting 1,000 trucks a day. It was not nearly enough, but we were pushing both our Jordanian Red Crescent and the Egyptian Red Crescent. I'm going to defend, have done an amazing job of trying and getting some aid in, but we all know not enough aid is getting in to Gaza. And we all need to work every single day to continue that pressure. And it's not just my voice, it is the voice of our other national societies. Not just even the Gulf has led the way, but through our other national societies have been very hard pushing on that. So thank you for saying that we need to turn up the volume, but I can assure you, if we're two more people around me, I am advocating for the need to have an environment where we can get aid in. And whether it's a small group, medium-sized group like this, or 500 people at the UN. Yeah. Oh yes, Sudan. No. Unfortunately, Sudan has not gotten the attention from the world that it deserves. And one of the things we have been, both the Secretary General and I have been talking about and trying to organize funding to get there, get more aid, more attention. I will tell you though, of the Sudanese Red Crescent, I had a meeting with her in, let me think, this summer, and I want to tell you her story. The military came and took her house. It was one of the first houses they reclaimed. She was pushed out of her home to save her children's lives. They were sent out of the country, but she has stayed. She has stayed and worked every day, despite that we've lost staff there, to help get aid in. And that's one of the issues we talked earlier about safety, was safely getting aid in. But we are pushing hard, and we talk about, there's not a speech, and I think even in this one I talked about that I don't, when I talk about humanitarian aid, I talk about Sudan, and especially the magnitude of what's happened there. 6 million people displaced, 2 million internally. It is humongous. And the fact that the world is not screaming about that is hard for me to understand. But we, as a movement, both the ICRC and the IFRC, we are there. Unbelievable challenges. Do we want to do more? Yes, absolutely. But as you know, it's a difficult situation. But my admiration for our Sudanese volunteers and staff cannot be matched for what their work they're doing on a daily basis.
Thank you so much, Kate.
Sorry. Oh, vaccinations. Your question was on the safety of vaccinations? Was that it? I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to talk to you. I mean, I can find out on what quality assurance we do. I do know that we were the first to get Mpox vaccinations into Nigeria two weeks ago about. We got 10,000 in. I want to believe we've done some QA, but I'm not familiar about that part. But if you'll give the person in front of you your name, and we will find out exactly what QA we do on that. I do know that one of my first, and then I promise to be quiet, projects internationally was fighting measles, and this was been in the 90s in Africa, where 1 out of 5 children were dying of measles, and we were very successful at doing that. And because we are, is because our national societies can go that last mile. We are trusted, we are able to deliver it. We delivered there and also in Ebola. It was our national societies that helped with that. But we work closely, I know, with Gavi and WHO. I just can't give you the specifics, but I'll be happy to get the information for you.
Thank you so much. In conclusion, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our distinguished speaker tonight for the openness and for the frank discussion. I want also to extend my thanks to the audience, our esteemed guests, and a special thank to my colleagues from the Qatar Red Crescent, Mr. Faisal Amadi, the Secretary General of the Red Crescent, Dr. Muhammad Salah, Dr. Ayham Al-Sukhni, and to my colleagues from the Center for organizing the event tonight. And I want to conclude with stressing the importance of our all joint efforts to protect the children in time of crisis, and together we must continue to strive for a world where every child is safe and the right are upheld. Thank you all, and good night.